Hi, this is Andrew from DPS here to talk to you about the very important topic of how to send contact closures over Ethernet. So as you can see, this is a blog on our website that was written by a member of my team. I will walk us through step by step and just use this as a guide. So we start off here by explaining that contact closures, as you may be aware, are discrete or digital inputs. These are things that are either on or off. They're not analog in the sense that they represent a range. It's just door open, door closed, temperatures too high or not too high, just 1 or 0 binary type information. And they might be an old technology, as we talk about, but it doesn't mean you can ignore them. They are there. People have predicted the death of contact closures for years, and I think we're going to see decades and decades more. It doesn't mean things aren't getting smarter, especially with IoT and protocols like Modbus, but these are things that you absolutely have to monitor, and you need a way to take them in, because especially older gear that you still have out there is going to be reporting this way. And so you're going to see intrusion alarms, beacon lights on towers, various equipment failures, environmental alarms. These are all things that will trip and then will become a discrete alarm or a contact closure that you need to collect. And suffice it to say, in this context, when we say send alarms over Ethernet, one possible meaning is what you're looking at here, where you have equipment that is connecting to some kind of a remote telemetry unit, which is your connection to the network. That is a LAN-enabled device that has contact closure inputs. So it takes in the alarms, and then it's going to pass them across the network to some kind of central management system. We've shown our team on here in this example, but any SNMP manager could also fill this role potentially if you have something you already use. And then, of course, it's going to put it on a screen and you're going to see it. So this is one way that you could send contact closures over Ethernet. I want to be clear, though, there is a different technology that might do something a little different, because it's an ambiguous phrase, how to send contact closures. If you literally want to send contact closures from one location to another and have them end up as contact closures at the site, not as an alarm on a screen, but a literal dry contact closure, that would mean, if we use just the lower part of this diagram for a second, I'll actually scroll it so we can just ignore parts of it. I suppose the LAN cloud is still important. If we were to look at something like this, you would have alarms coming in from the equipment into a remote telemetry unit, and these would be special NetGuardians that we have where we call an echo application, and that's really just an industry term. DPS uses it a lot, where you have alarms coming in. Those alarms are being sent across the network, but they're not going up to anything else northbound. Instead, they're really going, say, east or westbound, to use fiber terminology, but they're going to a peer. And that peer device would just be like another NetGuardian. And that one is going to have contact closure outputs, or relay outputs, which many of our RTUs do. And so when it receives the message from the first RTU that, hey, we've got this alarm at my site, it will then latch a contact closure and effectively replicate that alarm at that remote location. So I just want to be clear here. There are two ways to think about sending contact closures over Ethernet. It could mean the more conventional method of reporting alarms up into a monitoring system of some kind. It can also mean we want to send things from point to point. That's usually for very specialized cases or where you have a legacy network. So that's possible too. So as we proceed, I want you to understand that distinction. There are a lot of explanations here about dry versus wet contacts. You probably don't need to worry about that, but there is a detailed explanation here in the article about how you have one pin that's expecting to see a little bit of electrical flow and one pin that's putting a little bit. It's just like a continuity tester if you've ever done like a multimeter continuity test. That would see, okay, there's a little bit of power flowing, and all we need the connected device to do, say, if our generator latches a relay to say I'm running, it's just going to latch a dry contact with no electrical flow. We supply that, and it's going to be basically like a drawbridge that's going to connect that, and then it'll flow. So there's a discussion here of what a wet configuration would be, where the contact is wetted, it's already providing a bit of voltage. If that's your situation, you just need to tell us what you're trying to do, so that if we're supplying monitoring gear for a project you're working on, you got to work with your manufacturer to explain that, because you don't want to get in a spot where it's the wrong voltage or somehow it's otherwise incompatible. You just need to know that the inputs that you're collecting are going to be correct, so that LAN-enabled device that you're using, like an RTU, is able to take in the contact closure. So there's another diagram here showing a very similar thing, although the axis is flipped. Sometimes we'll show it this way. People will think about it from top to bottom or bottom to top. In this case, you have the devices being monitored at the top. They're all reporting contact closures to a smaller NetGuardian. This is the 216, which is about the middle of our capacity range for 16 discrete contact closures. And it's going to collect those and then report them over Ethernet to some kind of master station. Again, we've used our TMON as an example, but the NetGuardian can send SNMP, so that is possible as well. There is a very big question when you're talking about this kind of thing. How many discrete inputs should my RTU have? Well, the basic rules are you should have as much capacity as you think you need. You want to have some room for reasonable growth at your sites, but you also want to avoid excessive capacity, right? Why are we ordering a 64-point unit for a site that currently has 4 contact closures and may one day have 8? It's just wasteful. And that's why if you have been to our RTU page, you will see that there are just dozens and dozens of different remotes. And although some of them will have different transport, like some will support fiber, or maybe they can have a special ability, like they can parse some legacy protocol, or they can take in Modbus, or maybe they are a particular form factor, really the main reason why we have so many different RTU models is for capacity. So that's really how you want to think about it. Take what you currently want to monitor, and if you have a web meeting with me or someone else on the team here, we would walk you through a worksheet to say, okay, here are the 10 most common things that get monitored. Do you have these? And if you do, how many contact closures do they each have? We'll tally those up, and if it comes to a number like 12, you're probably looking at a 16-point unit like that NetGuardian 216 here. If it comes to 25, maybe something like 32. Most alarm points are in powers of 2. I do want to point out, though, that the monitoring hardware, and we reckon our prices at least roughly based on the hardware cost that it costs to build the thing, those discrete inputs are pretty inexpensive. So while you may want to react strongly to saying, hey, that's way too many analog inputs or that's way too many control relays, you really don't need to react quite so strongly to that's a lot of discretes, just because they're not as expensive to put in, and as a result they don't drive our prices as much as some of the other inputs and maybe heavy processor technologies, like if you need very secure web or something else, that is an important factor too. So if you do end up with a spot where you have maybe our NetGuardian 480, which has 80 discrete points, but maybe you only need 55, that's not so bad because you just have a lot of room to grow and you're not paying that much for the extra capacity. As we continue past that point, here are some examples. Obviously, this article will be illustrated with DPS examples. You'll find a lot across the industry that do this kind of thing, but in our world, those are going to be NetGuardian RTUs, as I've mentioned, in many different options, and those are available on the website. And then the TMON, which is available as an unrestricted master station. There are also 2 different variations of the TMON that have a site count limit, and that's just because people have come to us over the years and said, hey, we like this TMON thing, the map screens look good, we like what it does, we'd like that it can send email alerts, whatever they want to get out of it, but look, I've got 9 sites, I just can't justify this thing. And that's why we have the Slim and the Mini. Those are TMONs that just enforce a device limit, otherwise they're the same, and that means that you can get it at a lower price when you just have a smaller network that you're monitoring, either up to 16 or up to 64 devices, whether those are NetGuardians or SNMP based devices that have unique IP addresses. So that is just some examples. And the last point we make here in the blog is why you should invest in a customized RTU. Now, this is a specific point, really specific to DPS because of our ability to customize things. But we can tell you, no matter who you're working with, when the line in the sand where you may want to move toward customization is. So our basic rule is we will adjust our remotes for most reasonable adjustments, whether it's we want to have a semi-custom capacity. So instead of you building it as the NetGuardian 832 that has 32 inputs, we don't like to only have 20. Something like that. And that was actually a real request that came to us from a big railroad client at one point. So if you have that kind of thing and you need maybe 11 or more NetGuardians, that's where we draw the line and say, okay, we'll do this at no development fee. It will take usually something like 6 to 8 weeks. We'll send you a first article, and then we want you to try it because we're guaranteeing the thing. So I don't want to make 11 or more of them and have you ship them all back. So we would work with you on that, send the first article, do the testing, of course. And that's really a best practice, even if you're ordering off the shelf from a company for the first time. Get one, play with it, be sure that it's good. And if they don't have a guarantee that allows you to return it, you should ask some other questions about that as well. So to give you a little more context to this customization thing, if you want to see one other time where I did this, there are many, but this is one of my favorites. This is actually posted as one of my blog articles. And this is the NetGuardian DIN, which, as the name kind of uncreatively implies, that mounts on a DIN rail in a cabinet. And I had a power utility client who wanted an AC-DC PDU. And they also, not only did they want to take in AC, give us 6 ports of switch to AC, and then 6 ports of 24-volt DC that's produced from the incoming AC, they also had a 4-port serial terminal server. And they said, we don't want to cram that in there too. Wouldn't it be great if you could just put that onto your box? So that's what we did. But it all starts with a Photoshop usually. I'm a little bit of a photography wizard, so I get to do a lot of these virtuals, which I kind of enjoy. This is an actual photograph on the right of the NetGuardian DIN sitting on a lovely stack of Post-it notes. And on the left here, I just stretched it out, inserted new ports. These are all things that we've had on our devices before, but I was just putting them in a new arrangement to suggest, all right, this is how it ought to look. And I do work with engineering to make sure all the ports are in a line because they're going to be on a PCB, of course. But more or less, I have some freedom to give you a visual of what this thing might look like. And that was great because we got to have a meeting with this client, and they gave me notes to say, hey, the thing should be a little bit shorter because we want to get airflow in the cabinet above and below. But you can go wider if you need to, so I can go to maybe 2 sandwich circuit boards. And they give you some other notes. Of course, I forgot to put the fuses on the first draft. I mean, there's some things that just, as we were lining it up, said, oh, yeah, that's right. So these visuals are great for so many reasons. And then we met and we came to an agreement on this thing, and that led to a transaction. The initial order was above our minimum of 11. I think it was up in the 30 to 40 range. But they did that. We sent a first article, and then it was a real product. And I was very, very excited the day that this came in, and it was built within a few millimeters of what I had built as this Photoshop mock-up. So that's the basic process you can use to get customization. If you want 1 or 2 devices off the shelf, it may not be in the cards, but it's something that you should think about if you have a larger project and, hey, we're thinking about 25 or 50 or 100 or 1,000 sites. That's really where customization comes in. And that's where a company like DPS, where we have the engineers on site, we have the factory on site, might become more of an even more important factor. If you're buying one of our boxes, they're proven and they're reliable, but we really come into our own when you're able to customize and pick and pluck from all the various options that we have and build something that suits your needs. So that's a quick rundown of the concept here of how to send contact closures over Ethernet. As I spoke about, there's 2 basic variants on it. You could be monitoring alarms, or maybe you mean echoing alarms across the network from one device to another. Both those things are entirely possible, so just give us a call. As always, the phone number is 1-800-693-0351. You can also send email to sales@dpstele.com.